Who would have thought? We do this every week, but anyway. So we started a new Torah portion, and this week's Torah portion, hey Matt, good to see you. I didn't say hi. This week's Torah portion is Shoftim. And it is a beautiful portion with so many different mitzvot. In fact, give me a second here. I'm going to do some quick research for you, just because I know you'll appreciate this statistic. The Torah portion of Shoftim contains... Okay, this is great. Last week's Torah portion, Re'eh, contained 55 mitzvot. Now, that might not sound like a big number. Maybe it does. But know this, in the entire Torah, all 5 books of Moses, you only have 613. So last week we had 55 of them. This week we have 41 of them. So between last week and this week, you almost have a sixth of all the mitzvot of the Torah. So there's a lot of stuff to learn. Practical guidance, like do this, don't do that. But of course also the spiritual guidance and philosophical guidance and emotional guidance that we know and love and that we come to expect when it comes to Torah exploration. So let's jump in. I can't wait to do this with you. I'm going to share my screen and pull up Shoftim, and we're going to start. I have a few things that I want to point out. I'm not going to get to everything in the first two readings. We usually cover first and second on Monday, for Sunday and Monday. So we're not going to cover everything, but I have some highlights for you. So first of all, the name of the portion is called Shoftim. What does that word mean? What is Shoftim? So you should know Shoftim is, one second, I got to call it. Shalom, did you just call out the answer? So that if you're going to call out the answer, then you have to come here and say the answer. Only I should hear you say the answer. Come by and say the answer. Shalom Sollish. Come on. Now you're shy. You shouldn't have called out before. Shalom, jump in and share. What does Shoftim mean?
Judges.
Judges. Excellent. I've judged your answer, and you got it correct. A shofet is a judge. Shoftim is the plural for judges. And the Torah portion opens with a commandment, law and order. You have to set up your communities with a judicial system, with a law enforcement. There has to be this type of enforcement, this type of law and order. Take a look. Let's read it inside. Deuteronomy 16:18, verse 18. You shall set up judges and law enforcement officials for yourselves in all your cities that the Lord your God is giving you for your tribes, and they shall judge the people with righteous judgment. Okay, so a few important things. Number one, you need judges. You need a judiciary. You need a legal system. Number two, you need law enforcement. These are two different roles. So the law enforcement are those that are making sure that people are, staying within the bounds of the law. Judges come into play when somebody violates the law or might have violated the law. But you need both. Okay? And where should they be positioned? Oh, why is it missing this in the translation? That's unfortunate. In the Hebrew it says, B'chol sharecha. You should place these judges, etc., in all your gates, or at all your gates. Sharecha means gates. 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 Here is translated as place them in all your cities, but it's missing the specificity of gates. I'm going to get back to this from a psychological perspective soon. So set law enforcement, the judicial system, set it up in all your cities by the gates, and they shall judge the people. So, and how should the judgment go? With mishpat tzedek, righteous judgment, and that of course alludes to a theme that we've discussed many times, which is the Torah's mandate, Judaism's mandate to not just judge harshly, generosity, that charity. So even as you are adjudicating justice, you're also filled with a sense of compassion and understanding, etc. You should know, let me tell you this little detail that also I think connects. When it comes to judges, the mitzvah here is that you should set up the judges in all your cities. In other words, don't just have, this is very important. We have to understand what the Torah is actually saying here. What it says is have courts in all of your cities, at least if there's a decent amount of population. not just in one city. Why? Because if you have just one central court, then what's going to happen is that people are going to end up going to that court, and the court in that city is not going to understand the way people live in the other city. Are you with me? You have to be judged by a court, if not a jury, because Judaism doesn't have, Torah law doesn't have a jury, but you have to be at least judged by a court of your, not of your peers, but of your surroundings, right? The people who live in the diaspora are not like the people who live in Israel. And even within Israel, there are different cities. And so therefore, the Torah says you have to have these court systems, courts and judges in all of your cities, on the ground, to know and understand the challenges of the people and what life is like there, to be able to adjudicate in the proper fashion. And that's what it means with righteous. One of the meanings of righteous judgment is that your judgment should be righteous, should be done correctly, and with understanding, with compassion, but with judgment, but combine both. Let's continue. I'm still going to get back to verse 18 for a moment, but let's continue to verse 19. You shall not pervert justice. Don't mess this up. You shall not show favoritism. You shall not take a bribe. So these are two very important things. Number one, favoritism means that you're either, let's say you're going to favor the rich in the lawsuit or in the court case because you want to curry favor with them. Or maybe you're going to favor the poor because you feel bad for them. In both cases, that's not kosher. Kosher justice is kosher. In other words, it's done correctly and it's done righteously. But not favoritism because of a, I'm going to throw the case one way or the other. It's not okay. It's not legal. It's not kosher. You shall not take a bribe. Why not? For bribery blinds the eyes of the wise and perverts just words. I mentioned this also recently in one of our classes, one of our sessions, that bribery, it says, blinds the eyes of the wise. What that means is a person could be wise, and they take a bribe, and suddenly their wisdom is bending toward a different direction. And it also perverts just, or divrei tzadikim is the Hebrew, the words of the tzadikim, of the righteous. So even though you have a righteous person who's saying words of righteousness, nonetheless, when you have a bribery situation going on, it messes it up. Even if a person thinks that they're being objective, they're not being objective anymore because there was a bribe given. Next, the Torah continues with this theme: justice, justice shall you pursue. Double mention of the word justice, which connotes, number one, pure justice, number two, compassionate justice, and it also comes to indicate that we should always prefer to come to a settlement or some sort of mediation as opposed to there being an outright winner and loser. It's better that both feel like they've won, certainly in financial situations, financial cases, monetary cases. It's better to strike a compromise with mediation than, going for the jugular on the side of either party. Okay, justice, justice shall you pursue, and that's learned from this verse, this repetition, that you may live and possess the land the Lord your God is giving you. Okay, fine. So that the first several verses, three verses, are all about law and order. And then we get back to idolatry, which is a favorite topic of the book of Deuteronomy. You shall not plant for yourself an Asherah. Asherah was a type of tree that was used for idol worship, or any tree for that matter, near the altar of the Lord your God, which you shall make for yourself. So the idea is if you plant a tree near the altar, then you might come to start worshiping nature. And although we appreciate nature, and we're thankful that God created nature, but we don't confuse nature with God or God for nature. Two different things, right? God is God and nature is nature, and a tree is a tree and God is God. So we don't want to confuse the two, so don't plant it near the altar. Don't worship it. Don't even plant an Asherah, which is used for idolatry. By the way, even in the word idolatry, you have tree. Idola-tree. That was a joke. I didn't say it was a funny joke, but it was a joke. Okay. Mendel's smiling. No. Okay. Mendel, welcome back. It's a shout out to Mendel. We've missed you. Mendel was away for a few weeks, for 6 weeks, and now he's back. Better than ever. Okay. He was in camp. Don't worry, he wasn't like... All right, getting back to the verse, to the Torah text. And you shall not set up a monument which the Lord your God hates. And a monument here means like a monument, altar, a place to worship. It's not kosher. Good, I want to go back. So that's the first little section. I want to go back to the judges and law enforcement officials setting up by your gates. The commentaries say, though, what does it mean to set up judges and law enforcement officers or officials by your gates. This refers on a personal level to the gates of your consciousness. What does that mean? Your 2 ears, your 2 eyes, your nose, and your mouth. Those are the openings in your head, literally the openings in your skull, in which you and I take in information. We take in information through our ears, through our eyes, through our nose, through our mouth, also through our touch. But when it comes to the head, those are the portals, those are the openings that take in information. The Torah reminds us that when it comes to gates, when it comes to borders, so if you have no enforcement, then anything goes, and anything and any influence can come in, and that's not always healthy for a human being. Our eyes should not always be open. Our ears should not always be open, especially when we're talking about negative influences. So what the Torah tells us is to set up, there's a mandate, not only in the macrocosmic communal sense, but on a personal sense, on a personal level, to set up judges, law enforcement officials. Ask yourself the question, do I really need to be listening to this? Ask yourself the question, do I really need to be looking at this? Ask yourself the question, do I really need to be taking this influence in? Or is it not healthy? Is it not part of my spiritual growth? And therefore, I'm going to block. So, for example, when it comes to our ears, our listening, our sages tell us that God created a flap that we could use. I'm not suggesting literally to use it, but God created a little flap that we can use to cover, ow, that hurts, to cover our hearing, to close our ears, so to speak. God created eyelids to close our eyes. God created, I guess, nostrils that we could pinch, maybe. God created lips to close our mouth, to not be open and just take in or give out anything that we want to. So, what's the point? The point is to be judicious, to be mindful about the influences we take in. Look, it's easy to get inundated by the influences around us, but that's only if we allow ourselves to be influenced. No one can influence us if we choose not to be influenced. I've been reading Dr. Edith Eger's book, which is called The Choice. She's the Holocaust survivor and best-selling author that we're going to have live with us Thursday night. Very special event, and I hope everyone's joining us from this group. Certainly we have a lot of people joining us, and I hope everyone will be there with us Thursday night at 7 p.m. She is absolutely incredible. If you've never read her book, it's called The Choice. It's an international bestseller. She wrote it a few years ago when she was 90. She wrote her first book when she was 90 years old. The book is astonishing. There are no words that you can say to describe the book. It's mind-blowing, and it's shocking, it's uplifting, it's inspiring, it's filled with darkness and light in the same space. One of the major themes that she writes about, and that she'll talk about Thursday night, is the notion of choice. The book is called The Choice. And one of her major philosophies, and she's counseled and she's helped countless people that have had dealing with trauma. And one of her major tenets of her teachings is that we all have a choice. Not of what happens to us, but of what we do with that. So there's objectively what happens to us, but then there's what we do to ourselves, or what we let happen to us after that. And that's where we are in control of, or what we are in control of. So the fact that she was sent to Auschwitz, the fact that she was sent, months in various death marches, the fact that she witnessed what she witnessed, that's her story. That's what happened to her. But her choice is now what to do with that. Right? Her choice is how to move after that, or with that, how to continue to live or choose how to live. That's where the choice comes in. And so with each of us, obviously on a smaller scale, but also on a big scale, because this is the stuff of life, we have a choice every day what influences we'll take in. Just because people are talking about it doesn't mean we need to listen. Just because it's around us doesn't mean we need to look at it. And so the Torah encourages us to put the judges, to judge our eyes. Do we need to look at this? Do I need to see this now or not? Do I need to listen to this or not? And if it's not healthy, walk away. Close your eyes, close your ears, walk away, turn off the TV, close the browser, whatever it is. You don't have to. You don't have to take in that influence. You don't have to take it in. So, we all have that choice. Let's exercise it in a healthy way to keep ourselves healthy inside. The health that we have inside is directly connected to what we allow, the influences that we allow inside of us. So if it's not a good influence, don't let it in. Say, you can't. We all can. We all have that choice. That's where the judges and the law enforcement officials come in for our own, that's the personal understanding of it. Okay, hope that makes sense. Make sense? Yes? Okay. Let's continue. Deuteronomy chapter 17 talks about not bringing as an offering to God any animal that has a blemish. Right? So don't bring an animal that's, on its last legs. It's not nice. Bring a healthy animal as a sacrifice. If you're giving something, give it right. If you're dedicating yourself, this is a message for us in life also, a personal message. When we're doing something, do it 100%. Don't do it like 50%. You're committing to something, go all the way. Be all in. Leave it all on the floor, like they say in sports. Okay. Once again, we have the idea of idolatry, the punishment for idolatry, but we've talked about that many times already. Good. Let's move on to the second reading. This is the reading for today, for Monday, Torah portion of Shoftim. Okay, and here we have the mitzvah of appointing a king. Now think about it. At this point in history, the Jews had never had a king. I mean, there was Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Those are patriarchs. Joseph was the second in command in Egypt, but he wasn't a Jewish king for the Jewish people. Moses was a leader, but he wasn't a king. So here we go. I'm going to read this inside. When you come to the land, this is 17:14, Deuteronomy. When you come to the land the Lord your God is giving you, and you possess it and live therein, and you say, I will set a king over myself like all the nations around me. So the Torah says, you shall set a king over you, one whom the Lord your God chooses. From among your brothers you shall send a king over yourself. You shall not appoint a foreigner over yourself, one who is not your brother. So, a few things. Number one, the Torah understands that when the Jewish people settle into their own land, they may look around and say, well, every country has a king. Why should we be any different? And the Torah says, you know what? You don't have to be different. You shall set a king over you. It's fine. If you want a king, have a king. But, and here's the major caveat, and a few important things. Number one, let's go through all the prerequisites. Number one, it has to be per God's choosing and God's blessing. How are you going to know? Thank God for prophecy. Thank God for the prophets. God communicates with the prophets. Back in the day, Samuel and others, and they were able to appoint the kings per God's command. Okay. So number one, it has to be divinely approved. It has to be with a stamp of approval from God. Number one. Number two, a Jewish king has to be a Jewish king. So it has to be from among your brothers, otherwise they're not going to understand you. Not a foreigner. You introduce foreign rule over yourself, it's a death sentence. We know this to be true. This played out in history. There was a point in time in the Second Temple era when there was I think a queen who died, Jewish queen who died. The king had already died. She was the queen. She was ruling, and then she had two sons, I think, or there were two heirs to the throne, and they got into a fight, and they decided a compromise would be to bring in the Roman authority and have the Romans decide. And that was the beginning of the end. Once they brought in the Roman rule into Israel, that was it. The Romans never let go, and that led ultimately to the destruction of the Second Temple at the hands of the Romans. So bringing in a foreign power, suicidal, bad idea. And it played out in history as such. Next caveat, next check on the power of the king. Only, just that, he may not acquire many horses for himself. He can't have any horses, so that he will not bring the people back to Egypt in order to acquire many horses. For the Lord said to you, you shall not return that way anymore. Interesting logic, right? Don't have many horses, because if you have horses, I'm trying to say sources, horses, then you're going to want to go back to Egypt. The king's going to go back to Egypt because Egypt, I guess, has a lot of horses. I don't know. And that's not a good thing. Either way, the king is told not to have lots of signs of power. Kings in ancient times, a sign of their power and majesty would be horses and stables filled with horses. Jewish king don't have any horses. Right. Next, and he shall not take many wives for himself. Again, another mark of a king in ancient times was many wives or concubines. Not kosher for a Jewish king. And his heart must not turn away, and he shall not acquire much silver and gold for himself. More. Not much silver and gold. Again, another mark of a king. Somebody, you read this, and you're like, well, then why would I want to be a king? I don't get the horses. I don't get the wives. I don't get the silver and gold. What kind of gig is that? What kind of job is that? I actually have to lead the people. I have to direct and guide. I have to take care of the people. Who needs that? Give me the perks. How often did kingship come only for the perks and not for any responsibility? Only for the kickbacks. And the Torah says from the beginning, you want a king like the other nations. Okay, but it's going to be radically different. Don't you look at the other nations and say, yeah, we want that, because you're not going to get that. You're not going to get that. You're going to get a king, but not that type of king. You're going to get your own type of king. That's very different. What kind of king are you going to get? Look at this one, verse 18. And it will be when he sits upon his royal throne that he shall write for himself 2 copies of this Torah on a scroll from that Torah which is before the Levitic Kohanim. That's a very complicated translation. Basically, the king should have 2 copies of the Torah scroll, 2 Torah scrolls, and it shall be with him, and he shall read it all the days of his life. That's what a king does? Studies Torah all day? What kind of king is that? No horses? No wives? No gold and silver? No plundering? Yeah, this is a Jewish king. Having copies of the Torah with him, so that he may learn to fear the Lord his God, to keep all the words of this Torah and the statutes, to perform them, so that his heart will not be haughty over his brothers. What? I can't even feel bigger than other people. You're taking all the fun out of it. And so that he will not turn away from the commandment either to the right or to the left, in order that he may prolong his days and his kingdom, he and his sons among Israel. What happens here is, and this is something I explained last week in the context of, when we explored servitude and slavery, whatever, that the words may be the same. The words may be words that you're familiar with, but the concepts are radically different. It's a completely different ballgame. We have the concept of a king, but it's a different king. It's not a king that's all about arrogance and possessions and materialism and might and power and all that stuff. No, it's a king about service. It's leadership as service, serving the people in a righteous way, with humility and with a God-fearing perspective. This is at the core of Jewish kingship, and it reminds us of the meaning of power and the responsibilities of power. Power is not about what you get, it's about what you give. And that's what the Torah reminds us. Make sense? May all of our leaders, look, we're all leaders, may all of our leaders always remember this important teaching. To be humble and to be so word I'm looking for, to be not responsible, but to answer, like Hebrew National in their tagline, to answer to a higher authority. That's why the king has these Torah scrolls on his lap all day, so that you have a Torah scroll with you. What are you really going to do? How much trouble are you going to get into with holding a Torah scroll? That's the point. That's the point. And the Torah understands the seduction, the temptation of leadership, and how that can quickly get to somebody's head, and how that can quickly turn a good person into a greedy person, into an arrogant person, into a person that is only driven to hold on to power. It's not even about the people anymore. It's just about their own position. And that's not what a Jewish king is about. All right, so that's some Jewish lessons about leadership. I think they're very powerful. And I think if the world heeded this message, we'd all be better off. All right, thank you very much for joining me today for the Daily Power Parsha. Any comments, questions? Yeah.
Stepping stones.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so very quickly. There's a beautiful teaching in Hayom Yom. Hayom Yom is the thought for the day that the Rebbe penned in 1943 or 44. The Rebbe wrote a book, a Hasidic thought for each day of the year. It's like a calendar, like with inspirational thoughts. And I forget which day, but one day he wrote this. Something along the lines of, when a person walks down the cobblestone streets without thinking words of Torah, or without some higher inspiration filling their mind and heart, then the stones that they're walking on, that they're treading on, look up and say to them, Bor, which means empty one. What gives you the right, and who gives you permission to step on me? What makes you any greater than me? Which reminds us that the only permission that we do have to step on the stones is if we have in mind something higher, as if this is an elevatory experience. Otherwise, we are granted no permission to use something else if it's not for a higher purpose. So this
mindful, right?
Mindful, exactly, yeah. And that's specifically the context. If we're not mindful of something higher, then we're not allowed to step on something else. It's a responsibility. Because what makes us higher than some? Because we can move and they can't? That doesn't inherently make greater or worse. Now, if we use our mind, our power of intelligence, which we uniquely have, right? Just because stones have a soul doesn't mean they have an intelligent soul, right? They have a soul, they're alive, but we have an intelligent soul. If we use it for a higher purpose, so now we're talking. But otherwise...
Also respect, right? Respect for everything in our environment.
This should create a respect. And it should create a caution. In other words, a hesitancy. I'm only stepping on you to get, because that's the way to some higher, the next step in my mission. But not in a casual way. Yeah, it's a responsibility. All right, good to see everyone. For those of you that are joining us for numerology, tonight we have a tremendous class in store. 4 different numerological paths, each intertwined and each holding incredible wisdom. Tomorrow night is the Jewish course of why, with 10 more questions to explore. And Wednesday night is Torah studies, again focused on this week's Torah portion of Shoftim. And then Thursday night, 7 p.m., Dr. Edith Eager live in conversation with us. I'll be interviewing her, and she'll be sharing her story, and it's going to be an unforgettable event. So I look forward to seeing you all very soon. Tomorrow, Daily Parsha, same bat time, same bat channel. See you all soon. Take care.